And welcome to Advantage Radio Ministries and welcome to Second Chances here at Lift FM. My name is Greg Hennis, and this is our weekly program that we are privileged and honored to bring on each and every week. And one of the reasons we are privileged and honored is because God has sent so many neat and exciting people to this program. And we have a person that's been with us multiple times over the years, but always a fascinating interview. Her name is Kathi Macias, and the book we're talking about is entitled Return to Christmas, and it's actually Macias. I'm sorry about that, but Kathi, thank you for joining us here on Second Chances, and it's glad to have you back.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Well, the book that we're going to be talking about this time around is Return to Christmas. Before we do, though, just for the purpose of our listeners that have never had the privilege to hear an interview we've done with you in the past, give us a little bit of background on who you are, Kathi.
Well, I was not raised in a Christian home, although because of the very fact that I grew up in America, I thought I was a Christian. Had someone asked me, I would have said I was. But when I became in my mid-20s is when I really came to know the Lord. One of my brothers had come to the Lord by then, and my mother, and everybody was praying for me. So I came to know the Lord at the age of 26, and I won't tell you exactly how long ago that's been, but quite a while. And so I've walked with the Lord for several decades now, and I am a grandma and even a great-grandma. And my husband and I live in Southern California. We've known each other since we were about 6 years old. And my heart is just to write about and speak about issues that really bring healing, not only in the church, but even to those who don't yet know the Lord. And many of those issues tend to fall into the category of social issues. So I write about things like human trafficking and the persecuted church and homelessness and that sort of thing. So that's pretty much my passion, what I like to do.
Now, it says here that you have crafted more than 40 books, including Extreme Devotion Series, and you've even won Novel of the Year. Tell us what your first book was.
You know, my first book was really surprising. I hadn't even planned to do it. I was working in-house at Gospel Light Publishing at the time, and another lady who worked there said, have you ever thought about doing a women's compilation devotional? And I really hadn't, but apparently she had. And those who are hadn't really burst on the scene and become popular yet then, as they, were several years later. So our timing was good. So we put together a women's devotional, just little short reads for every day, and they were written by women from all across the country, different walks of life, and some professional, some not. And they were each the kind of thing you could read in just a matter of 3 to 4 minutes. And so we called it A Moment a Day. And that book actually became one of the publisher's best-selling books, and is probably to this day the bestseller of all which are now 50-some books.
How about that? That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I would have asked you all those years ago, were you going to write a lot of books, what would you have told me?
Absolutely. I didn't yet know what they would all be about, but this is something I had decided I would do when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. I just loved to read, and if I ran out of books, I started making up my own stories. So when a lot of people will say, when did you know you wanted to become a writer? And I said, as soon as I knew there was such a thing. So I'm not one, like many of my friends have done that, but others have said, well, I retired from being a teacher and decided I'd become a writer or whatever. It just has always been there. I love words. I love what you can do with them, and the amazing inspiration and encouragement they can give to other people.
Today we're talking about the book entitled Return to Christmas. We are visiting with Kathi Macias. And Kathi, tell us what Return to Christmas is about.
Well, this is another one of my issues that I like to base stories around. And it takes place in the run-up to Christmas, the last few months up to Christmas time. And it's about a former Marine named Chet, who comes back from his second tour of duty with a pretty severe case of PTSD, but he's also in denial and doesn't want to deal with that. He just keeps thinking he should get over it and do better, and which is really common. A lot of people come back with that, and this is what they think. Or even sometimes families will relate to that same situation and say, why don't you get over it? You've been home for months or years, Years ago, they used to refer to it as shell shock or that sort of thing, and didn't really know what PTSD was. But now we know that about one out of every 8 veterans that return from the battlefield come home with PTSD. Many of them have it treated, but many of them don't. And so the results of that are a lot of times just destroyed families, destroyed lives, and it's just really sad because there is help available. But when you're dealing with someone, particularly a man who has an ego thing where he doesn't want to admit that he's not strong and that everything isn't fine, they don't get the help, and the problem just spirals into something worse. So that's what I wanted to depict in Return to Christmas, where we do have him dealing with that. He can't find permanent work. It's putting a strain on his marriage, even his relationship with his little 3-year-old son. So it's all about coming full circle to a place where he is able to admit the problem and seek some healing.
Now, this book, as you just mentioned, deals with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Was there a reason that you wanted to focus in on this specific topic? Was there a situation that you knew of or people that you knew of that really could be helped by kind of talking about this in this manner?
Well, no one personally, but I come from a military family. I was never active military, but my father was, my husband was. I have a couple of grandsons in the Navy now and a brother who is in the Navy. So we've got a lot of military people, and we often get together and start talking things. And, my family knows I'm always looking for and praying about the next issue I want to base a story on. And so one of them said to me, I can't remember if it was my uncle, my brother, whoever, said, have you ever thought about doing one on PTSD? I bet you that would be a really good one to build a Christmas story around. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, that would be a good thing. Because I like the idea that it was worked into a Christmas story, because that always ends on a note of hope. But it also reminds people that while we're out there celebrating and having this wonderful time and anticipating all this family time together, there are some, mostly vets with the PTSD, but there are other people who have been through traumatic experiences too who can get this. And because of that, they're withdrawn. They're just not able to enjoy the season the way most of us do. And so I kind of wanted to make that combination in the book.
Now, obviously, as we've alluded to here, that PTSD not only can destroy individual lives, but it also can tear families apart. How do we do a better job, or how can we actually do a better job of helping men and women once they, leave the military and re-enter civilian life? How can we do a better job helping people that have been exposed to these things?
Well, my suggestion is that we don't wait until they're actually back, but we start preparing ourselves before that. There are groups available. There are support groups not only for the veterans and those returning, but for their families as well. And often it's women, it's wives of soldiers that come back, and they're already connected. I remember from our military days, we did child care switches between ourselves and lived close to each other. And so they can be helping each other and encouraging each other and learning about this topic before their spouse returns. And then, of course, churches can get involved in this just as much as providing a place for them to do that.
We're visiting with Kathi Macias. She is the author of Return to Christmas. And Kathi, before we continue the interview, if someone would like to learn about more about this particular project or you in general, is there a website that you have that one could obtain copies of your book, learn more about you, things of that nature?
Absolutely. My website is Kathi, Kathi, Macias, Macias.com. I even have something on my blog, which is there on the website about it. And, of course, they can find the book. They can even contact me if they have a specific question. And also my publisher, newhopedigital.com, has free downloads available for discussion questions, whether someone wants to study it by themselves or start a group. They're there for them to download if they want them.
Mm-hmm. How long has this book been out?
Oh, not very long. Just let's see, where are we? We're okay.
We're in December. We're in December. Okay. Kathi, the book Return to Christmas, we're dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. Are some people more susceptible to it than others, and why do some people deal with stress better than others?
Well, I think a lot of it may be to do with what our emotional and mental condition is even before we become involved in such a situation that brings that on. But I've also found that people who have very tight and supportive families do much better. Ones who are already talking to each other and they're communicating. This helps tremendously because the people, if the person knows that there's unconditional love for them at home, they can pretty much go through anything, and they can, they're more open to seeking healing if it's needed and to talking it out. And so I think that's the main thing, is that people will understand that there are avenues of help, a way to get help. And if that person is someone who knows that, who seeks that out anyway, they're much more likely to get the healing they need. But as far as who it impacts, we couldn't find anything that actually nailed it down, said this type of person would be more susceptible than the other, except for the fact that if someone is emotionally or mentally fragile, it certainly can increase their chances of getting it.
Now, obviously, the book, Return to Christmas, you think about Christmas, you think about truly, for a lot of folks, not everybody, but it's the happiest time of the year where people are really happy, and generally you see the best in people. Not always, but a lot of times. So when you think about a book like this and you think about Christmas, it's almost kind of a little bit opposite, because this tends to be a little bit on the depressing side, dealing with some of these things. Why combine both Christmas and issues like this in the same book?
You know, it's really true, but in fact, I have found in almost all of my novels where I incorporate something that could be a really tough and depressing subject into a story with a positive and hopeful message in it, that it really, I get so many thank yous for doing that. People will come out and say, I haven't been able to talk to anybody about this, but now I know that I'm not alone. There are other people. There are things I can do. And I think it's just really important for us to remember that whether it's PTSD caused by a battleground events or something entirely different, there are people right now at Christmas, and people with issues other than PTSD who may be going through really tough relational issues, or whether emotional or mental. And so I think it's important for us who do have the blessing to enjoy this season so wonderfully that we understand and remember that not everyone is feeling as joyful or happy as we are. We can pray for them. We can make sure that there are things in place for them to get the help they need. As I mentioned something about churches, if we begin maybe a discussion group at church involving those who maybe have a military spouse or someone who has been involved with a situation that brought on PTSD, having a place to go and others who say, I care, I understand, you're not alone. And then with the run-up to Christmas, they aren't becoming more depressed. They're rather becoming more hopeful that they can make it through.
Now, something else I want to touch on here is another type of disorder entitled attachment disorder in children, especially those kids who have been absent from moms, dads in their formative years. Talk to us a little bit about attachment disorder in children.
I had not heard of that until I began researching this book, and someone mentioned to me that they understood that attachment disorder in children had many of the similar symptoms of PTSD in adults, and I thought that was interesting. So I began doing some checking and researching, and what I found was attachment disorder in children is about 8 out of 10 children who go through an extremely traumatic experience, particularly if it is the removal or the separation from their primary caregiver between the ages of about 6 months to 3 years. About 8 out of 10 will end up with this attachment disorder, which leaves them frightened and vulnerable and absolutely mistrusting. And so they're afraid to develop relationships with adults, because whether they can verbalize this or not, they are afraid that adult, the minute they attach them and become close and begin to care and trust them, is going to disappear from their lives. And so as I realized that mistrust that fuels that, I began to compare some of that with what I had learned in the PTSD study, and I thought this was really a good thing to incorporate into the story. And so I have a little child who has this issue, not in the Marines family, but some friends of theirs, who was taken out of a drug situation when he was about 2 years old, and just does not bond with adults, and is very frightened and withdrawn. And the the Marine with the PTSD, who won't talk about it either and keeps it inside, begins to, through family relationships, begins to spend time with this child, and slowly but surely begins to recognize that, the little boy seems to have some of the feelings that I have. And the two of them begin very slowly to draw close to each other.
Talk to us a little bit, if you could, Kathi, about an overview of what would be known as re-entry dynamics into a family when a spouse has been away for a long period of time. Give us some of the re-entry dynamics, if you could.
This is important because even if someone comes back, and I'm going to use the military here, but it could be some other situation, if a veteran comes back, male or female, but it's usually still more often the man who comes home, and the woman, and while he was gone, has held things together and maybe even gotten a job and done all the parenting issues by herself, and suddenly he's back, and he's expecting to step in where he was before and become the primary breadwinner and one of the decision makers and a partner in the parenting situation. It's a little bit tough for both of them to suddenly make this adjustment back to where it was before, and it can raise all sorts of resentment with either spouse. And then, of course, that causes friction with the children. There's just a million little splintered, fractured issues that can come off of this one thing. And so this is something that is really helpful for a spouse waiting for another spouse to come back from the battlefield or something else, that they will begin to be aware of this, what to expect and what to anticipate and how to respond to that. And hopefully getting the spouse who's still overseas, wherever he may be, also reading about this and learning about this so he or she can know how to respond when they get back.
We are visiting with Kathi Macias. The book is entitled Return to Christmas. Kathi, for those joining us in the middle of this interview here, would like to learn more about you, this book, past work, coming work, what's the website you could recommend?
My website is Kathi, Kathi, Macias, Macias.com. There's some information about me there. You can actually contact me, and if you have a question or comment you want to pass along, and of course you can learn more about my writing, my speaking, my mentoring, that sort of thing.
Okay. And obviously the topic we're really dealing with in this book is Return to Christmas is really post-traumatic stress disorder, which leads us to the next question. When men in particular come home from battle, they're looking for a sense of purpose. In what ways does the lack of purpose create, does it actually create conflict for them when they first get home from the battlefield?
It surely does. And whether a man is a Christian or not, men gain most of their sense of self-worth. Now, a Christian, of course, gains it in the presence of the Lord and who they are in Christ, but they still themselves need this sense of importance, or at least of sufficiency and being needed, and a sense of worth that comes mainly from two things, which is their ability to work and provide for their family, and their relationship with their wife, and believing that they're still attractive to that woman, and that they married and left behind and now have returned to, and that they're still partners, and that wife gives them respect. And sometimes, even if they can't, as I said before, even if they can't verbalize it, this is a need that a man has when he comes back from the battlefield, is to be not only welcomed, but to be appreciated, not to be resented. And even if he doesn't know that that's what he's seeking, those two things, the relationship with his family and his ability to provide for that family, are the two things that will help him reestablish himself in the civilian world. And so if neither he nor the spouse is aware of this, and all these other issues have already been set in place while he was gone, it really can tear down their manhood. And then what they do is withdraw even more, or at times have outbursts of anger, and that, of course, is very destructive to the very relationship that they want to save.
What are some of the sources of resentment when men or women return from war and re-enter with their family?
Well, as I said, one of them, of course, from the one returning, is feeling like they've been replaced. that they're not needed anymore. But for the one who's been at home, most likely a woman, the wife, she's had to do all the parenting herself, make all the family decisions, pay all the bills, do all these things, and suddenly here comes this other person who's saying, you don't need to do those things anymore. And for the most part, that, although there are exceptions, but for the most part, that creates a lot of resentment on both sides. And if they're not open to talking about this and working this out together, it can lead to even further estrangement.
Why would you say that people that suffer with post-traumatic stress disorder often become recluses?
I believe they do that simply as almost a means of self-protection. They're so afraid and vulnerable to let people see what they've truly become while they were gone. They don't like that they're dealing with these issues, and they want to be able to hide that from the people they care about. And if it comes out through angry outbursts or just inability to carry on the relationship and conversation they used to have, then they decide, it's just easier just to be quiet. I'm not going to talk about this. And so they begin to withdraw, and they can withdraw deeper and deeper as time goes on. And that's why it's so important for both members of a relationship here in that sort of situation that they get some counseling, some maybe group interaction and support so that they can begin to talk to each other, because that's what's going to save the relationship.
Now, in your book, you include a twist on faith where there's a difference between the spouses in your book. This isn't just for military families, is it?
No, it's not. And I really wanted to show that there are things that are similar, that someone coming home with PTSD will go through, whether they're a Christian or not. But there are other things, of course, that they have help with as believers. But when they have a spouse who is a strong believer, and if she's wise enough and gets proper counsel for herself, she can know how to not push her spouse away and deeper into withdrawal, but rather to just pray and to allow God to work in his heart to bring him back, to bring him to that place of seeking help. Now, I'm not going to be naive and say that happens every time, but it does increase their chances of working things out in the relationship if at least one of the two are believers who will have prayer support from other people and listen to God for direction and be patient with that person.
What do you recommend that a woman could do? Her husband suffering with PTSD, and just doesn't understand what they're feeling inside. They want to help. Is there something you could recommend that women can do to kind of get a better understanding of what their spouse may be feeling?
Well, I think what's really helpful here, if there isn't already a support group of that sort, the thing I like about support groups as opposed to just maybe your girlfriends at church or wherever, you need to know that when you go to this place and you discuss some of these issues, those discussions never leave the room. Because one of the things that Christians can have to be careful about is they can get into a place where they're just heartbroken. They want so much to help their spouse, their husband, and so they talk to someone, and then that opens the door to maybe that getting passed on to someone else. What you need, of course, you need sharing. Of course, you need support. But you need to get that either through a good Christian counselor or through a good support group that is really well established and where you know you're safe to share things there. And if there isn't already such a group available, that's the time to talk maybe to your pastor or somewhere about, can you provide the room? And then you go to the New Hope Digital website and download those discussion questions to get that sort of thing going. And then, of course, have your pastor put it in the bulletin or whatever and see. I think most people are surprised at how many others have similar situations going on, and so they can begin to get the encouragement and support they need through that sort of help.
We're visiting with Kathi Macias, the author of Return to Christmas, PTSD and the Military. Kathi, if I said to you, what would you like your readers to take away from the book after they read it, what would you tell us?
I would say the same thing that I do in any of my books where I deal with issues that have a sense of darkness and even destructiveness. And many of the books, the things I've written about, do have that. So This one isn't the first one, but I want for people to see it is real. We do need to deal with it. It really can be a hard thing, but it can be healed. Your heart can be healed. Your relationship can be preserved, and there is hope in all. After all you're going through, God is there to bring you through to healing.
Well, Kathi, one thing's for sure, I always believe that when we bring people on and we talk about different topics, that the Lord draws people to this program that could be encouraged, could be ultimately delivered, and ultimately we love to have our guest, as you know from past visits, pray for our listeners before they leave the program. And, you know, if someone is listening to this program today and maybe they don't even know the Lord as their Savior, but they're in a situation where they've been dealing with PTSD, and they can relate to everything you're talking about, and this is a golden opportunity that the Lord has laid before them to have someone pray with them, even on the radio, to be encouraged and be saved, set free. Would you be willing to lead us in a prayer right now for those people, Kathi?
Of course, I'd be glad to. Thank you. Father God, I thank you so much that your word promises that you are near to those with a broken heart. Whether someone has a broken heart because of the issue of PTSD or something else entirely, you already know about that. You know exactly what that person needs and where to meet them to begin to bring healing. All they need to do is open their heart to receive that hope and that healing from you. And so I pray, Lord, for everyone listening right now, if they do have that broken heart for whatever reason, there's pain that just has not been healed, I pray you would seal to their broken heart the fact that you are near to them, and that if they will just turn to you and ask them and ask you to help them, that you are faithful and you will do that. You will meet that need. You will meet them at the point where they are, and they can begin a whole new life of trust and faith in you. I ask you, Lord, to just surround them with a sense of your love and your presence and of your peace right now. And I thank you for each one that is receiving that promise of your nearness in the middle of their heartbrokenness, Lord. I thank you for each one, and I thank you for your faithfulness to us all. In Jesus' name, amen.
Our guest on Second Chances today has been Kathi Macias. Kathi is the author of Return to Christmas. Kathi, one more time, places they can obtain a copy of Return to Christmas, places where they can learn more about you.
Well, it's in bookstores around the country, and of course, and all the online venues such as Amazon, Barnes & Noble, ChristianBook.com. But if they'd like to learn more about me and maybe more about the topic, again, they can go to NewHopeDigital.com and download the discussion questions for PTSD. But my website is Kathi Macias, Macias.com. And that's really the place to go to find out what's going on and what I'm working on now. And just if you just have a question that they want to send my way, I will answer it.
Okay, well, Kathi, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to having you back in the future.
Thank you so much. I'd love that.
We'd love it, too. Our guest, Kathi Macias. Tune in next week for more Second Chances right here from Advantage Radio Ministries on Lift FM.